Ron Howard is Hollywood's golden boy, the polite kid from Mayberry who grew up to win Oscars, dominate box offices, and earn the kind of respect most directors can only dream of. But 6 decades at the top didn't come from charm alone. Behind that smile lies a history of chaos, clashes, and personalities so intense they would have crushed most people. So how did a kid from small-town America survive some of Hollywood's most explosive sets? What you're about to hear isn't the clean, polished story you read in magazines. This is the truth. The co-star who nearly attacked someone on set. The legendary actor who terrified a 5-year-old Ron. The Oscar winner whose temper turned every day into a minefield. These are the 6 actors who pushed him to the edge, tested his patience, and forced him to learn how to survive and thrive in Hollywood's most dangerous playground. This is the untold side of the man everyone thinks they know. Francis Bavière. To millions of Americans, in the 1960s, Frances Bavière was Aunt Bee, the warm, maternal heart of Mayberry. She was the woman who ensured Opie's safety, fussed over the quality of her pickles, and held the town together with a quiet grace. But behind the facade of small-town sweetness lay a very different reality. For a young Ron Howard, working alongside Bavière was his first lesson in the dissonance between public persona and private temperament. While audiences saw domestic warmth and charm, the cast and crew encountered a classically trained New York stage actress living in a state of perpetual icy disdain for her comedic surroundings. Bavière did not see herself as part of a sitcom ensemble. She saw herself as a serious dramatic artist trapped in a medium beneath her talents. This created a unique friction on set. Unlike the overt anger of a typical diva, Bavière's tension was quiet, cold, and unyielding. A subtle force that a sensitive child actor like Howard could not ignore. In a town designed for communal warmth, she was an island of professional austerity. She did not want to be Aunt Bee off camera. She wanted recognition for her stage credentials. The hijinks of Andy Griffith and Don Knotts, the ad-libs and laughter that defined Mayberry, were for her an intrusion, a diminishment of her craft. Howard quickly learned that the person smiling on screen could be the one least likely to extend warmth behind the scenes. The lessons came in strange, sometimes alarming ways. Bavière reportedly swung an umbrella at Jim Neighbors when his singing annoyed her. For Howard, this was a confusing, early exposure to the complex layers of personality that could exist behind the familiar faces of Hollywood. He learned that intimacy on screen could be an act of will, not reflection of genuine connection. Every smile, every hug, every carefully timed gesture required effort, understanding, and discipline. It was a masterclass in performing chemistry and managing difficult colleagues, skills he would carry into his directing career decades later. Bavière eventually retired to North Carolina, shunning reunions and leaving behind the role that had made her a household name. For Howard, she was a living example of the Golden Age ghost, the actor haunted by the work they feel they should have done, trapped between talent and the confines of fame. He remembers her with a mix of pity and respect, recognizing that her coldness was both a challenge and a lesson. Frances Bavière taught him that professionalism does not always align with warmth, that the face the world sees is often only half the story, and that sometimes the most difficult colleagues leave the most enduring impact. Yul Brynner. If Frances Bavière embodied quiet, simmering resentment, Yul Brynner was the exact opposite, a blazing, unavoidable sun that demanded every orbit in the room bend to his gravity. Ron Howard encountered Brynner on the set of the 1959 film The Journey. Howard was only 5 years old, a small, red-headed boy thrust into the orbit of a man who didn't just act like a king, he believed he was one. Famous for his shaved head and commanding voice in The King and I, Brynner carried an aura of absolute authority, a presence that made no concessions for anyone, let alone a child. For Howard, it was his first encounter with the archetype of the sovereign star, the actor who dominated not just the screen, but the very air of a set. Brynner's intimidation wasn't mere theatrics, it was psychological. He moved with a rigid, almost terrifying grace, issuing decrees rather than directions, scrutinizing the space and people around him as if he were weighing their worth in real time. For a child accustomed to paternal warmth and guidance, this was alien. Brynner had a way of looking through people rather than at them, creating a sense of absolute vulnerability in anyone who dared meet his gaze. On set, even seasoned crew members scrambled to anticipate his moods and preferences. Slightly offline, imperfect lighting, or misaligned energy could shift the entire atmosphere. Displeasure from Brynner wasn't a critique, it was a climate change, a sudden heaviness that settled over the room. For young Howard, this was a lesson in how a single ego could hijack an entire creative process. It was the antithesis of collaboration. Where Howard would later cultivate sets built on trust, openness, and collective creativity, Brynner exemplified an immovable object, a performer whose commitment to his own myth outweighed the comfort, expression, and agency of everyone else. The experience left a lasting imprint. Decades later, as Howard transitioned into directing, the ghost of Brynner lingered as a cautionary figure, a reminder of what not to do. Howard learned that fear can elicit precision and intensity, but it creates brittle environments where innovation is stifled and voices are silenced. Brynner's presence showed him that Hollywood isn't just a playground, it's a hierarchy, and survival requires a keen understanding of power dynamics. But more importantly, it taught Howard that true mastery as a director isn't about commanding through fear. It's about creating a space where brilliance can flourish. The Emperor model of Brynner left a shadow, but Howard used it to define his own light. One measured not by domination, but by collaboration, respect, and the ability to nurture genius without suffocating it. Shelley Long, by 1982, Ron Howard had reached a pivotal moment in his career. No longer the child actor under the watchful eyes of Hollywood legends, he was now a young director tasked with proving he could lead a major feature film. That project was Night Shift, a comedy that demanded a delicate balance of chaotic energy and heartfelt grounding. In Shelley Long, Howard discovered a remarkable comedic talent, but also a challenge he hadn't anticipated: an analytical perfectionist whose meticulous approach threatened to stall the production entirely. Long came from Chicago's Second City, a world that prized intellectual rigor, improvisation, and deep character analysis. While Michael Keaton improvised at a breakneck pace and Henry Winkler exuded natural warmth, Long often functioned as the brakes on the set. She didn't merely want to deliver lines, she wanted to understand the molecular reasoning behind every choice her character, Belinda, made. For Howard, this was more than directing a film. It was a baptism into the complexities of star management. Each day required negotiation, patience, and a careful balance between maintaining schedule momentum and honoring Long's obsessive perfectionism. The tension wasn't born of ego or malice. It stemmed from a fundamental mismatch in pace. Howard, shaped by the high-efficiency demands of sitcom production, prioritized momentum above almost everything else. Long treated the set as a laboratory, meticulously dissecting every nuance and variable before moving forward. While not a diva in the traditional sense, Long's perfectionism could overshadow the ensemble, creating subtle friction. On night shift, this manifested as endless questions, repeated takes, and a near-constant negotiation of pace. There were even whispers that she developed habits, accidental or otherwise, that kept the camera lingering on her, a precursor to the scene-stealing issues that would later frustrate her Cheers co-stars. For Howard, the experience became a lesson in directorial psychology. The analytical anchor isn't attempting to sabotage a production. They are seeking security. But that security can form a wall, blocking the rhythm and creativity of the entire cast and crew. Managing Long required more than patience. It demanded clarity, authority, and the ability to establish firm boundaries without stifling artistry. Howard learned that being nice wasn't enough to lead a set. He had to be decisive, communicative, and unafraid to assert control over process and pace. Night Shift became more than a comedy. It was Howard's masterclass in human dynamics. It taught him how to channel friction into productivity, how to manage the gravitational pull of strong personalities, and how to shape his emerging leadership style. It was the moment Howard realized that a director's job isn't just about angles or lines. It's about navigating the complex ecosystem of talent, temperament, and ambition, transforming potential conflict into collaborative success. Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe wasn't just a difficult actor. He was a force of nature. By the time Ron Howard cast him in A Beautiful Mind, Crowe had already built a reputation as a mercurial genius, a man whose Oscar-winning talent was matched only by his explosive temperament. Where Shelley Long's friction had been a slow, intellectual grind, Crowe was a lightning strike, raw, unpredictable, and completely immersed in the psychological world of his characters. For Howard, the perennial seeker of harmony, directing Crowe meant navigating a storm, a gladiator of performance against the boy-next-door sensibility Howard had honed over decades. Crowe's method intensity was legendary. He didn't just play John Nash, he inhabited him, and he expected everyone else on set to accommodate that level of obsession. Every line of dialogue, every prop placement, every camera angle became a battlefield of negotiation. Crowe's questions, often polite on the surface, were long, probing debates that tested Howard's patience and creative flexibility. His presence dominated the room physically and psychologically, demanding a level of commitment that few directors could manage. On the sets of A Beautiful Mind and later Cinderella Man, the tension was palpable. Days could pass in silence or heated argument, the atmosphere thick with Crowe's dissatisfaction, and the cast and crew often felt the weight of his intensity. One of the clearest examples came when Crowe insisted that A Beautiful Mind be shot in chronological order, a logistical nightmare. Howard initially resisted, aware of budgetary and scheduling challenges, but Crowe's argument was relentless. The psychological deterioration of John Nash could only be portrayed authentically if the story unfolded in real time for the actor. Howard eventually relented, restructuring the entire schedule. The result was nothing short of cinematic genius. Crowe delivered a performance that won him an Oscar, and Howard proved he could manage brilliance without letting it destroy a production. Directing Crowe taught Howard an essential truth. Some actors aren't looking for a nice director. They're looking for a partner who is just as obsessive, just as committed, and just as willing to weather the fire of creation. Surviving Crowe's intensity required a new kind of directorial skin, one that could absorb volatility without fracturing the team. The experience showed Howard that conflict, when harnessed correctly, isn't a liability. It's fuel. By navigating the storms Crowe brought onto set, Howard learned that brilliance often comes at a cost, And the mastery of that cost is what separates a good director from a legendary one. In Crow, Howard faced Hollywood's fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for any challenge the industry could throw his way. Tom Sizemore. While Russell Crowe represented the fire of genius, Tom Sizemore embodied a far more tragic and corrosive kind of Hollywood friction, the slow-motion collapse of reliability. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Sizemore was one of the industry's most sought-after tough guys, a powerhouse actor who could stand toe-to-toe with legends like Robert De Niro and Tom Hanks. But by the time he began working with Ron Howard, Sizemore was becoming the poster child for the destructive intersection of talent and personal demons. For Howard, a director who treats every set as a collaborative family, Sizemore's presence was a painful introduction to the unpredictable shadow side of Hollywood. Sizemore's difficulties weren't born of ego or ambition. They stemmed from the unrelenting grip of addiction. Howard's sets operate on a simple Midwestern work ethic. Show up early. Know your lines. Respect the crew. Sizemore, caught in cycles of substance abuse, often lived in direct opposition to these values. Unlike a diva demanding extra trailers or a perfectionist requesting endless retakes, Sizemore created a vacuum of anxiety. Every day the call sheet listed him. Howard wasn't wondering whether a scene would be great. He was wondering whether the actor would show up at all. Each missed cue, each delayed take, each unpredictable outburst siphoned hours of production time and creative energy, leaving the entire set in a fragile state of tension. For Howard, working with Sizemore became a lesson in the ethics and practicalities of directing. How do you safeguard hundreds of cast and crew members and protect a multi-million-dollar production when one of your essential collaborators is unraveling? Sizemore represented a tragic clash between unrealized potential and the unforgiving realities of human frailty. His brilliance as an actor was eclipsed by the chaos of his personal life, turning every day on set into a tightrope walk. Unlike conflicts born from temperament or ego, Sizemore's friction forced Howard to pivot from mentor to guardian, balancing compassion for the man with duty to the production. The experience left a lasting impression on Howard. It underscored the limits of diplomacy, kindness, and patience on a film set. Sizemore became a reminder that the hardest challenges aren't always the actors who push back. They're the ones whose personal struggles threaten to derail everything around them. Howard learned to prioritize character in the personal sense as much as the theatrical one, ensuring that those entrusted with a story could meet its demands not only artistically, but responsibly. Sizemore remains a shadow in Howard's career, a haunting testament to the cost of unrealized potential and the fragility beneath Hollywood's glamour. Henry Winkler. The most complex friction in Ron Howard's career didn't come from an enemy. It came from his best friend. On the set of Happy Days, Howard was the undisputed lead. Richie Cunningham was the moral center around whom the entire 50s nostalgia was built. But within a few seasons, a cultural phenomenon occurred that nobody anticipated. Henry Winkler's Fonzie didn't just become popular. He became the sun that the entire show orbited around. For Howard, this was the ultimate test of ego. He found himself in the paradox of the sidekick. His character remained the heart of the show, but his status in the industry's eyes was being eroded by a leather-clad supporting player. The friction here was unique because it wasn't personal. Howard and Winkler loved each other. Winkler is the godfather to Howard's children. Yet the structural dynamics created a painful situation that tested their friendship. Howard has admitted that the network's treatment of him changed almost overnight once Fonzie fever took hold. Executives began speaking to him with a disrespect that stung deeply. They floated the idea of changing the show's title to Fonzie's Happy Days, a move so insulting to Howard's professional standing that he threatened to quit. He wasn't jealous of Winkler's success. He was protective of his own dignity. This was a lesson in the erasure of the lead. How quickly Hollywood will toss aside a reliable workhorse for a flashy thoroughbred. Howard handled this with a maturity that was beyond his years, a phrase Winkler himself uses to describe the teenage Howard. While the press tried to stir up a rivalry, Howard focused on the work. He realized that Winkler's brilliance was good for the show. But he also realized he could no longer stay in a house where he was being treated like a second-class citizen. This friction became the primary catalyst for his transition to directing. If the network didn't respect him as an actor, he would become the one who hired the actors. Years later, the two discussed this openly. Howard confessed that it did hurt his feelings, a rare moment of vulnerability from a man who usually keeps his cards close to his chest. This represents the most human friction of all, the pain of being eclipsed by someone you genuinely love. Howard's ability to remain friends with Winkler while navigating that professional hurt is perhaps his greatest achievement. It showed that being the nice guy isn't a weakness. It's a form of extreme emotional intelligence. Winkler didn't just provide a sidekick for Richie Cunningham. He provided the final push Ron Howard needed to stop playing a character and start building an empire. Ron Howard didn't just survive Hollywood. He studied it, navigated its sharpest edges, and turned every collision into a lesson. But for every triumph, there's a story still hidden in the shadows. The moments that tested him, the personalities that pushed him to his limits, and the choices that shaped a career few could ever match. The question isn't whether he could endure the chaos, it's whether anyone else could walk the same path and come out unbroken. Who else in Hollywood has faced this level of brilliance and brutality and emerged not just intact, but transformed? The curtain has lifted on part of the story, but the full truth of what it takes to survive and thrive in this world is far from over.